So I've got these problems. I have lots of problems. One of my problems, I'm going to talk about one a little bit later, but the one I got to tell you right now is it's hard for me to step up and speak and not tell you what I have heard in the few minutes before church began and I came up on stage. So here it goes. I'm opening the tent flap so you can really see. So 2 people have told me, I sure hope I can stay awake during the sermon this morning. And I'm married to one of those people. The other guy who told me that, he said, hey, if I fall asleep, that's a good sign, John. That's a really good sign. So, okay. Hey, and there's a gathering of some of the men who lead the service over in the office before this begins, and that's always an encouraging time. One of the guys said to me, there's no class today, so you can preach as long as you want. And another one said, and the tradition is, the audience really loves long holiday sermons, so go get them. I walked in, somebody else mentioned, hey, are you preaching today? And I said I was, and he said, I think I've got time to get somewhere else now, okay? And then somebody sitting right over here in front of me said, are you preaching? And I said, yeah. And he said, man, we are scraping the bottom of the barrel there at the end of the year. Okay, so that's just a warning. If I ever get to preach again, be careful what you say to me before I get up here. Hey, Lee Strobel is coming on February the 8th. We had him at Oklahoma Christian a couple of years ago. I want to encourage you to turn out for that. He is an outstanding speaker, really encouraging, such a great apologist for our Christian faith. So please be a part of that. Well, I love Daniel's comments at the table this morning. So thrilled that Daniel and Amy and their family are back here with us at Memorial Road. This is the time of year that people think about a lot of different things. Today is the last Sunday of the year. It's also the last Sunday of the decade. So a lot of people are thinking about what they're looking forward to, what they're dreaming about, what their resolutions are. So, what's mine? Mine is not some big highfalutin thing. Mine is, I want to not forget as much stuff as I forget. And I have forgotten things for a long time. When Darla and I got married, we moved out to Southern California. We both went to law school at Pepperdine. We had a lot of people that came out to see us. They wanted to come out and see us ostensibly. They really wanted to go to Disneyland. So we would always take them to Disneyland. And let me tell you, you do not want to spend the full day at Disneyland. The park is then closed. You walk out with thousands of other people, and you look at each other and say, where did we park? It takes a long time for that parking lot to actually clear out. But I still forget things even today. So 4 weeks ago, I found the perfect gift that I wanted to buy Darla. And so I ordered it. It came in the mail. I saw that it had come in the mail. I rushed in to grab it so Darla wouldn't see it. I didn't have time to wrap it, so I put it somewhere. A week later, I had time to wrap it. I looked in every single closet of our house. I looked under every single bed. I looked behind the books in our little office there in the house. I could not find this gift that I had bought Darla. But I still had time, so I ordered another gift, the exact same gift in a different color. It comes in the mail a week later. I see it's in the mail. I grab it so Darla won't see it. And the weird thing is, I pull it out, and it's like, man, that's not the package that I looked for the last time I was looking for this gift. But, oh well, maybe they changed their packaging in the last 2 weeks. So I took it out of the package, and then I went into the office. I opened the closet door. I pulled up some papers because I didn't have time to wrap it. I was going to put it in here. And lo and behold, the first one I ordered was right in there. I wrapped both those for Darla. She had a great Christmas this year. But I do have a few life hacks that I have kind of come to do very often so I don't have to remember some things. Every time I come home, I go in through the garage door, and the first thing I do is I hang my keys on a hook. They are always there. Every time I come to Memorial Road, I park in the exact same parking spot. because I don't want to have to remember where my car is. If anybody's ever in my parking spot, I'm going to have to change membership, ladies and gentlemen. The third thing that I have done, and I really would encourage a lot of you all to think about this, in my wedding band, I actually had inscribed on the inside the date of our wedding. Darla, I've never had to look at that. I've always remembered the date of our wedding. In fact, the font is so small at this age, I can't see the date of our wedding in this ring anymore. Jeff McCormick, who's a good friend and the dean of the College of Science, told me a story. He told me, you got to go look at this thing on a TED Talk on the internet because you'll really like this. In fact, I liked it so much, I used it to open OC the last few years when our students gathered together on the first day of chapel. And it talks about forgetting. There was a fellow named Drew Dudley. Drew had worked at a small faith-based college up in Canada, and he was moving on. He was going into another line of business. It was his last day at that small college, and a young lady came up to him and said, "Drew, you don't know me, but you changed my life." Now, if anybody ever comes up to you and says, "You changed my life," you want to listen to what they have to say. And this is what the young lady told to Drew. She said, "About 4 years ago, my mom and dad brought me here to college. We had come a long distance, and I was scared to death. I was homesick, and I concluded this is not what I needed to do or where I needed to be. And I told my dad that, and he said, 'You know, honey, we've driven a long ways, but I understand. So we'll take you back home. But, while we're here, let's go ahead and go to campus, and let's see what it's like. And as soon as you think this is not the place for you, we will turn around and we will go back home.'" And that was good with her. So they go to the campus. She actually gets in a long line to register for classes. And as she's standing there with her mom and dad, and she's telling this story to Drew Dudley, she realizes, okay, I'm not supposed to be here. I've got to get out of here. And so she's about to turn to her dad and say, "Take me home." When she says to Drew, all of a sudden the door slammed open, and you were standing there, and you walked in, and you had the goofiest hat, and you had a sign on that said Shine-A-Rama, and you had a bucket, and the bucket was full of lollipops. And you began going down the line, and you gave every single person in line a lollipop. And you came to me, and you looked at me, and you looked at me, and you didn't give me a lollipop, and you kept going. And I was devastated. And you handed a lollipop to the guy who was right behind me in line, and then you leaned forward to him and you said in a really loud whisper, "Hey, you see that good-looking girl standing next to you? You ought to give her your lollipop." And she said, and Drew, his face got real red. He looked down and he held out his lollipop like this. So I took his lollipop. And as soon as you saw that, Drew, you stepped back over in front of me with my parents and you said in a really loud voice, "Did you see that? Did you see that? It's her first day away at college, and she's already taken candy from a stranger." Then she said, "Drew, you really changed my life." And then she turns around and begins to walk away, and then she stops and looks back and says, "Oh, and Drew, that guy who gave me the lollipop, we're still dating today." So Drew leaves, and about 6 months later, he gets an invitation in the mail, and the invitation is to the wedding of that young lady and that young man. The funny thing is, Drew says, "I don't remember anything about that." Sometimes the most important things can absolutely be lost to us in our memory. The most important thing to somebody else might just completely miss us. So, 3 things that I want to really remember going into this next year. These are 3 things that sometimes I just forget. and maybe you'll share these with me. The first thing is this. Sometimes I forget what my role really is. I mean, I sometimes get wrapped up in myself, and I think, man, my problems are way more complicated and way bigger than anybody else's problems. Sometimes I think, man, the struggles I have, they're way tougher for me than anybody else has. When I get lonely, I'm way lonelier than anybody else. When I have a victory, it's the greatest thing. Nobody has had a victory quite like this. I mean, let's face it, sometimes I fall into the false belief that the universe revolves around me. Then I go to Facebook and realize the universe does not revolve around me. It's politics or funny cat videos, okay? Those are the things that are really, really important. In Luke chapter 1, God sends Gabriel to Mary. He has a message for her. Gabriel sees her and says, "Greetings, you who are highly favored. The Lord is with you." And that startles Mary. She's kind of scared about that. And Gabriel goes on and says, "Don't be alarmed, for you have found favor with God. And you're going to be with child, and you're going to give birth to a boy, and you're going to name him Jesus, and he is going to be great. And his Lord God is going to give him the throne of David, his father David, and he's going to inherit and rule over the household of Jacob forever and ever." And Mary says, "How can this be? I'm a virgin." And the angel continues and says, "The Holy Spirit is going to come upon you. You're going to be overshadowed by the power of God. And that's why the young boy born to you is going to be known as the Son of God." Even your relative Elizabeth, in her old age, this woman who is said to be barren, she is in her 6th month of pregnancy. And I love this line, "For nothing is impossible with God." But remember this first thing that I want to remember, what my role is. It is so perfectly articulated by what young Mary says next. She hears all this, and she says in Luke chapter 1, verse 38, "I am the servant of God. May it be to me as you have said." When I wonder what my role is, when I think that maybe I'm pretty special, no, the thing that I've got to remember, my primary and most important role is that I'm a servant of God. Well, here's a second thing I want to remind myself of as we end this year and go into the next year. Man, I love things that are just amazing and remarkable. Okay, I've got a new smartphone. My wife talked me into going and buying one. I really like it. I mean, I don't even have to remember a code to punch into it. I hold it up to my face and it unlocks and it does stuff. My phone has a pretty good memory, so it actually recognizes me most of the time. My phone is so smart that every time I get in the car, it will tell me how long it takes to go home, even if I'm not going home. I think my phone is an introvert. It always wants to go home. I get amazed at what I believe is remarkable technology. But you know what? I forget to be amazed at something way, way, way more amazing. Yeah, I love Jesus, and I don't forget Jesus. But I have heard the stories about Jesus, and I've read the stories about Jesus since I was a little boy, and I've heard sermons about them. And my confession is to you, sometimes I begin hearing another story about Jesus, and I know how it ends. And so I check out. And I don't think about absolutely how amazing these stories are, how jaw-dropping these stories are. Our whole world has just celebrated the birth of Jesus over the last few days. It was miraculous. And how amazing that God would so humbly begin his son's life on this earth in a manger. But it's not just that story. You know, we learned that the first miracle that Jesus did that was recorded in the Bible, He goes to a wedding celebration with some of his followers. His mom is there, and we learn some things that really are pretty remarkable, both because they are so normal for us and so out of the normal at the same time. So he is at this wedding feast. You know the story well. His mom comes up to him and says, "Hey, they're about to run out of wine." Now, does that sound like a lot of our moms? I mean, really, maybe not about the wine part, but a lot of our moms, they know what's going on. They know there's about to be a problem, and they also know that their son or their daughter can fix the problem. And Jesus, like us, sometimes says, "Mom, man, it's not time. Please, don't pull me into this. This is their deal. This is not my deal." And she hears that, and just like some of our moms, she goes to the servants at the wedding and says, "Hey, go talk to Jesus. Do whatever he says." And Jesus, because he loves his mom, and because he doesn't want the groom to be shamed by running out of drink at the wedding, he changes the water to wine. That is a remarkable story. But it's his power over nature as well. He's upset with this tree, and so that tree dies the next day. He's asleep on the boat, and his followers think they're going to die because the storm is so terrible. And they wake him up, and he says, "Peace be still," and it all settles down. Another time on the boat, it's deep in the night. Again, the wind is hard, and they are struggling against it, and they see Jesus walking on the water toward them. And how about the healings? I mean, think about the healings. We think they're so normal for Jesus. How miraculous must they have been and amazing? So, he heals a young girl who's demon-possessed. He heals a young boy who is demon-possessed. There's a man that can't hear or speak, and so Jesus puts his fingers in the man's ear, and he spits, and he touches the man's tongue, and he can now do both. Then there's a man who can't see, and Jesus goes to him, and he spits in his eyes, and he rubs his eyes, and he says, "What do you see?" And the man says, and this has got to be, I think, one of the funniest lines in the Bible. He says, "I see people. They look like trees walking around." I mean, when you go to your optometrist and they say, which is better, A or B? And Jesus says, "What can you see?" "I see people. They look like trees." I mean, I think Jesus probably laughed when he said that. And he rubbed his eyes again, and the man could see perfectly. Or the man who had been crippled from birth, and Jesus healed him. The faith of his friends who lowered him through the roof was just absolutely remarkable. He healed a young girl who had died, whose parents really needed her. And then he sees a funeral procession, and there is a widow, and she has lost her only son. And he is so moved by that, he stops the funeral procession, and he tells that young boy to live again. His friend Lazarus dies, and he's been dead for 4 days. And people say, "Don't do it, Jesus." And Jesus says, "Lazarus, come out." These are stories that you and I know, and they are remarkable stories. These are stop the presses stories. These are change your life stories. And I forget that. And then how about when Jesus knows his very close follower is the traitor who's going to turn him over to the authorities? And Jesus has the strength to do nothing about it. And he's called before Pilate and called before others, and he doesn't defend himself. And then Jesus, while he is on the cross, prays to God, "Father, forgive them because they don't know what they're doing." He's raised to life again, and how remarkable and amazing is that? And the first people that he appears to are women. Remarkable for the time. He walks with two and finally lets them realize who he is when he breaks bread with them. He appears to his apostles. In fact, he appears to 500 people over the next few days before he ascends into heaven. And Thomas, because he's not there the first time, says, guys, I'm not going to believe you. I don't care that you all believe that Jesus is alive. I'm not going to believe it until I see him. And Jesus patiently appears to Thomas and says, Thomas, look and feel and touch my side. And Thomas says, my Lord and my God. And Jesus says, you believe because you see. Blessed are those, that's us, blessed are those who believe but don't see. It's amazing to me that Jesus was so patient, he didn't say, I told you so, or come on, guys, or whatever. Maybe one of my favorite stories is one that occurs when Jesus is just a young man. And I've just not paid enough attention to this story. So this is a little bit of group participation for a few of you. If you are 12 years of age, if you're a young man or a young girl who is 12 years of age, would you please stand up just for a second? Okay, got a 12-year-old over here. Any more 12-year-olds, please, over here? Okay, everybody take a look, because this is the age that Jesus was when his mom and dad took him back to Jerusalem. Okay, you guys can sit down. You've all earned a scholarship at Oklahoma Christian University, okay? Come and see me afterwards. So every year, Jesus' parents would take him and the family to Jerusalem for the Feast of the Passover. And when Jesus was 12 years of age, they all gathered up their stuff. The Passover feast was over, and they're heading home. And at the end of the day, Mary and Joseph realized that Jesus isn't in the group. You know, every once in a while you hear the story about, you know, the couple, the man and his wife, and they're traveling across the country, and they stop on I-40 at a gas station, and they get gas, and they get something to drink, and go to the bathroom and get back in the car, and then 60 miles down the road, the man realizes his wife is not with him, and he has to go back. I mean, that's the situation here, okay? Mary and Joseph realize that Jesus is not with them. My guess is it was even more alarming to them than you can imagine. Not only have they left their son in the big city of Jerusalem, they have left the Son of God in the city of Jerusalem. They were entrusted with God's Son, and they don't have him. They rush back to Jerusalem, and they look for 3 days to find Jesus. And they find him, and he's in the temple courts, and he's with the teachers, and he's asking questions, which is a way of teaching, and he's listening to them. And it says that everybody is amazed at this 12-year-old boy and what he knows. Mom, Mary, comes up to him and says, Jesus, we've been searching frantically. We've been so anxious for you. And Jesus' reply is, well, didn't you know where I was going to be? In my Father's house? But I love what happens then, because Jesus goes back with his mom and dad, and it says that he is obedient to them. I know all of these stories about Jesus, but I don't necessarily spend the time to think about how amazing and remarkable they are. But Mary does something after this encounter, this experience in finding Jesus in Jerusalem. It's the same thing she did after the shepherds visited her at the birth of Jesus. Mary, the mother of Jesus, took these experiences and she treasured them in her heart. She really, really internalized them and thought them through. I forget how remarkable and amazing Jesus and the stories about him are. I need to do the same thing that his mother did. I need to ponder them and treasure them in my heart. Here's the third thing that I tend to forget, and it deals with family. I love family. Growing up, I knew who my family was. My family was everybody that had or had a last name that began with a lowercase letter and had a capital letter midway through. And we also violated the English rule of I before E. Our name spelled E-I. And so if you had a name like that, man, we're kin. You're my people. We've got something. We've got family. Then I realized that maybe there's even more family than just that. And so if you and I went to the same family reunions or the same church camps, or if you and I had similar opinions, or if we rooted for the same team, man, I felt closer to you. For the last 17 years, if you've loved Oklahoma Christian, man, you are my family. I guarantee you that. In John chapter 19, Jesus really expands for me who my family is. You see, in John chapter 19, Jesus is on the cross. You know the story, and you know what's happening. Lots of things are going on. Pilate has had a sign placed above Jesus' head, and it says, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And the Jewish leaders didn't like that, and they said, well, we don't want that sign there. Just say he said he was the King of the Jews. And Pilate said, hey, what I've written, I've written. We also know that in fulfillment of prophecy, the guards there had divided up Jesus' stuff, and they even cast lots for this very special piece of clothing that he had. We also know that there were at least 5 other people right there at the cross. There was his mother Mary, Mary's sister, Jesus' aunt. There was also Mary, who was married to Clopas, and Mary of Magdala. Mary was a very popular name in the first century. We also know that John the Apostle was there, because in the latter part of John chapter 19, Jesus looks and he sees his mom and he sees John, the apostle whom he loved, and he says this. He says, "Dear woman, behold your son. Behold your mother." Jesus gave John the responsibility of taking care of his mom, and she moved in with him for the rest of her life. Family is not just who you are blood related to. Family for us are people who believe in and are loyal to Jesus. You are my people. You are my family. What's my role? Well, my role is to be a servant of God. What should I be amazed at? I should be amazed at the stories of Jesus. And who are my people that I can love and support and help and be helped by? It's those who love Jesus. So in 1908, a woman named Minnie Louise Haskins wrote a poem. She actually didn't publish it for another 4 years, and then when she published it, she did so in a real private fashion. It really did not become very well known to the public until 1939. That's when King George VI used this poem in his Christmas address to the British Empire at the very beginning of the terrible dark clouds of World War II and Nazi Germany as they were forming throughout Europe. These are some lines from this poem, and I love this poem. And I love it because I think it helps remind me that I don't know what the next few days hold. For that much, I don't even know what the next year holds. But there's something that I can do about it. And I said to the man who stood at the gate of the year, "Give me a light, that I may see the way as I travel into the unknown." And he replied, "Go out into the darkness and put your hand into the hand of God, and that will be better for you than a light, and that will be safer than a known way." So I went forth, and finding the hand of God, I trod gladly into the night, and he led me to the hills of the breaking dawn in the lone east. Brothers and sisters, we don't know what the next year holds for us. We wish we had a light. We wish we knew the path. But what I know is the things that I forget, what's my role, how amazing Jesus is, who my people are, I can have the year that God wants me to have if I trust in Him and put my hand in His. This might be the day that you want to come forward and put on Jesus in baptism. This might be the morning that you want prayers of encouragement. This might be the morning that you have a special need in your life that you want to share with your family here. If there's any way we can be of service to you, would you please come forward while we stand and while we sing.